Hey everybody, my name is Andy Marie Green, and I am coming to you today to talk about my term project, which was a literature review. Please excuse how I look. I'm currently getting over some illnesses, so if you hear me in and out a little bit, that's why. So I did my literature review on a topic that is kind of untouched on a little bit, but it's how culture affects higher education. So how does the lack of presence of culture affect what is seen from different cultures as far as higher education? So a lot of times as educators, and even just in the world and society, we tend to place culture into two categories: color and based on skin color and maybe like ethnicity of where you come from, that kind of thing. But culture can really be a variety of different topics. So culture can also be based on the type of income your family makes. It can also be on your status as an individual. So whether you are married, unmarried, it can also be as far as the LGBTQ community. That's a different culture that no one really refers to as a culture. But each of these individual cultures tend to make up a person's experience. And so for us to ignore those cultures kinds of put a bad vibe with education. So as educators, it is our job to make sure that culture is allowed to be shared and expressed in our classrooms. So the connection between culture and higher education is that some cultures feel as though education is a burden and don't see themselves moving on to the next level of education. So one of my studies brought up a very, very good point, and it was about representation. So it's about seeing yourself, feeling yourself, believing yourself, achieving it yourself. How do you visualize yourself in a position you've never seen anyone like you be in? How do you conceptualize the fact that there is a chance for you to make it to where they are, but you don't see them? So lack of representation is one of our highest failing culture points in higher education. Without the representation, those students don't feel that that's somewhere they need to go. It's almost as if education has become a burden. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. It's almost as if education has become a burden to those students from different population or different cultures. Sorry. So another type of culture that they talked about in one of my studies was low income. So low income students tend to have other priorities in their life that doesn't allow them to see the uplifting that education can do for them. It's almost as if like they can't endure the positivity of education because they have so much more on their mind. It's not a forte because it's not something that's talked about in their culture. Like, for instance, me becoming a teacher, I don't hear people talk about that often in my culture, if ever, honestly. And so putting those into perspective for our students is something that we need to do a better job at educating ourselves to help those students get to the level of focus that they need to be at in order to get to the next steps of higher education. During this higher education process, it's almost as if those students who come from different cultures and not the mainstream culture that has been pushed in the higher educations, I forget what I was saying, so I'm going to nix that. But when we go to predominantly white institutions and come from a culture, it's almost as if though we're scared to bring our culture in. So one of the studies talked about how a welcoming environment for students to share their culture allows for a growth in that setting. So like they can grow because now they feel they're trusted that they can be in this setting and do better and that they can get better or more out of it. I don't think that there's a time where a student joins a mainstream culture and feels as though they didn't have to lose part of themselves. So I think one of the main things from my study that I got is that we as educators and as administrators need to do a better job at allowing our cultures to blend and come into the education system. It's not that we have to shy away from culture being present in the education. It's that we need to bring more of it in, allow each of our students to be seen throughout their educational journey. So that way they know that there are goals that they can get to that don't necessarily pertain to just what they're used to, that there are other options in the world for them to get to, and that there's other options through higher learning that will allow them to be there. So the last thing I want to touch on about it almost seems as though between money and mainstream ideas is that the term higher learning or higher education is out of reach for cultures that do not fit in those mainstreams. So how do we allow our minority cultures to feel just as powerful to obtain education degree as everybody else? So it's almost like they feel as that there's no need for the degree because they're still going to be treated based on the culture that they belong to. So I think that overall, this was a great project, and I'm so happy that I took time to do it because I learned a lot from this, and it was super exciting just getting to read other people who feels not necessarily the same as I feel, but they have reviewed things that matter to me and that they took the time out to also write so that I can have some more to research on it. So I think that moving forward that we need to allow the cultures to be shared throughout our educational journey and not shy away from offending another culture, but allowing all to be present inside of the educational journey.